What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Quarters Podcast. We're back. We're uncovering January gems. We made that up, but we're looking at the 2025 NFL Draft and some hidden sleepers out there that you should be aware of. We got 6 for you, so forget the big names that are going out there. We're hearing them all. They're all going to the Senior Bowl. We're hearing Shador. We're hearing Cam Ward, all those guys. No, we're not giving you those names. Now we're going deep, so we're going offensive players and defensive players. So if you're in fantasy, this is one to stick around in because we're going to talk about some underrated guys there. And from a draft perspective, we're going to be talking about some underrated defensive guys on that side as well. So stick with us, hit that like and subscribe button while you're waiting. All right, so we each got a couple guys here to talk about that we like as kind of our gems. First up is Christian. He's going to be talking about his man crush right now at the wide receiver position. Christian, who do you want to talk about?
Jalen Knoll, the Iowa State wide receiver that doesn't get as much hype as the other one, Jaden Higgins, who has certainly become more of a household name over the last few weeks. I think people turned on the Iowa State film heading into the college football playoff. And it, got a little excited because the two wide receivers really good, or at least the Big 12 championship. But 5'11", 200 for Jalen Knoll. This is the kid that I know Kevin has really liked for quite a few years, actually. But this was by far his best season. 1,193 yards, 80 receptions, 119 targets in this Iowa State offense, and he scored 8 touchdowns. Progressively just got better every single year. I think, he went from 269 yards to 572 to 820 to 1193. That type of progression, we talk about that a lot on this show, but that type of progression is something that NFL teams will look at. This is a kid that in this Senior Bowl, because he's going to the Senior Bowl. I didn't say that, but in this Senior Bowl atmosphere, he is the type of player that will vault up boards. He is a very, very explosive player at the line of scrimmage, especially. His release packages are probably the best in this class, including the top guys like Tedero McMillan, Luther Burden, Emeka Ibuka. I would take Jalen Knoll's release package over all of them. I think some people get a little bit concerned about the actual long speed. I've seen that as a cause for concern, but I'm not necessarily worried about that, if only because I think he's one of these guys that you can play him as a Z wide receiver, you can play him in the slot, he's gonna win his routes, and he's gonna win, especially underneath and intermediate. Those are where he cooks. He was kind of inconsistent as far as like yardage goes throughout the year. He had a lot of boom games. He had, I think, 5 or 6 over 100, and then a lot like in the 40s and 50s, but that just shows what type of wide receiver he was for that Iowa State offense, where Higgins was kind of your chain moving type of guy, and then you would sprinkle in Knoll to get you some yak. That's another thing that he does really well. He's a good ball carrier. I think he bounced off tackles really well. He averaged only 4.2 yards after catch per reception this year, but last year was up at 6.9. And I think kind of a mesh between the two is what he'll be at the NFL level. This is a kid that I'm just very, very excited to see at the Senior Bowl because, like I said, that's an environment where I don't see a lot of corners on that roster that can kind of hold him in 1v1s. And so I think what's about to happen is we're going to see, Jalen Knoll, top 5 wide receiver. Where's this kid been? I'm telling you, it's all over the film. Just toss on the film. Very, very explosive. And I like an explosive wide receiver that can just win immediately. That's going to help younger quarterbacks. He has very clear, visible separation. He's physical. Kevin called him, my love child or my man crush or whatever the hell he just said. And when I talk about him, it's tough to come up with, downsides. So he's my wide receiver 6 right now, but even that feels like, I could see him creeping up to 5, even 4 in this class. This is a good player, in my opinion.
Randy, you got anything for Jalen?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched him specifically a lot yet because I did watch Higgins first, and you could see Knoll kind of pop all over the tape. He's a consistent chain mover for him, and that's a guy that's always going to be valuable at the next level. The long speed might not be there fully, but I think he's a playmaker no matter what.
Yeah, surprisingly, I mean, he spent about 69% of his plays in the slot, but he out wide, I mean, about 30%. So, like, he did have kind of that versatile alignment, which he'll probably, I don't know. You watch Jalen Noel, you don't see the 200-pound frame. Like, you're like, oh, okay. Like, you wouldn't expect that number. So it's going to be interesting to see there. But his ADOT 12.2, you like that too. Yards per route run 2.62. I think the one thing that stands out to me about Jalen is his route running. Like, he consistently can get a separation. And that's what you kind of want with these guys. And to Christian's point, when he's talking about the Senior Bowl, now these things are very fluid, knowing who's going and accepting bids and all that kind of stuff. But Trey Amos is probably the best cornerback that's going to be there. Then Maxwell Hairston is next. After that, Noel's going to feast on some of these guys in those one-on-ones. Like, we've seen that. Haven't you seen those guys that just kind of they break out and all of a sudden you're just like, wow, this kid's just going up the boards. He's going to be a Senior Bowl darling, I think, in my opinion. Like, just that kid that kind of goes there. And from a wide receiver perspective that's at the Senior Bowl right now, he could really he could be receiver one out of that room. Like, out of everybody that's going there right now, you're looking at the Savion Williams could be another riser. But the other guys, Xavier Restrepo, I mean, I know people like him, Alec Ayomaner from Stanford, but looking at this list, you're like, hey, Noel, Tez Johnson, guys that create that separation off the line, are quick and do those things. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some question marks at the wide receiver class as a whole. So when we're thinking of like, who's the guy after 4, right? If you classify Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, then you're looking at like who's that next guy to step up. Why can't Jalen Noel be that guy, right? Why can't he be that 5th or 6th guy? And then you're like, hey, this kid is really good. So I like that call, Christian. Any final thoughts here before we move on?
No, I mean, in looking up and down the roster, you mentioned a couple of the guys. I mean, Savion Williams is certainly going to turn heads when they get into like team situations, but
yeah,
and I think he has a pretty good release package as well. But man, it's just like I don't see a whole lot of guys that are just going to be burning DBs off the line of scrimmage, which that one-on-one is those are the clips that get pulled. That's the stuff that we see on social media. And those are the things that catch a lot of the scouts' eyes. So I'm curious to see if he's one of those guys that impresses so much throughout the first couple of days and then just doesn't play in the game. That tends to happen with quite a few receivers. I don't necessarily know if he's the caliber receiver to do something like that, but we've seen stranger things happen at the Senior Bowl. We'll see if they add a player in favor of Kyron Lacy as well. Man, he's probably not going anymore. Talk about that next week, maybe.
He's going to be on the remake of The Longest Yard in about 10 to 12 years. That's where our guy Kyron Lacy's going to be. All right, let's go over to mine. My man crush. I can't leave Christian hanging there. He got all mad at me. It's Brashard Smith, running back out of SMU. Now he's a smaller guy, 5'10", 196. But this year, when you're looking at what he did for SMU, 1,300 yards, the 232 attempts, and the 14 touchdowns. He ranks 2nd in the ACC as a runner. So he really kind of, when you think of what he was able to do this year on the ground, he was one of the best runners in the ACC, scored 18 total touchdowns. And so that's something you like to see. He had 4 receiving touchdowns as well. And I think from like, if you're going to be a 196, you really want to see explosiveness, but you really want to see pass catching. So like you want to say, hey, okay, can he do that? Had over 300 yards receiving, the 4 touchdowns, really showed versatility in both those roles. So that's something that you like to see from him. I think from a skill set. Now, this class is loaded at the running back spot, but I will say this, like we've had some guys opt back into college. So Singleton, Katron Allen, some of these guys that you're like, dang it, I wish you would have came out. Now that they're going back, and we don't know what some of the Ohio State guys are going to do. Well, Henderson's gone, but Judkins, what's Judkins going to do? Like, is he going to come out there? And so maybe a guy like Brashard Smith can find a role. I think on tape, when you watch him, he's, the vision is there. I think he has football IQ that you like to see there. And you like the way he's able to find holes and just kind of burst through them. And I think that's something to say, like it'd be a zone scheme, something like that. He looked really good. Even those 2 games, like Penn State, Clemson, when you're thinking of when they played there, he looked pretty good in those games. Against Penn State, he had over 100 yards. And even though he's small, you did see the attempts. He had 232 attempts. Like he averaged about, I'm pretty bad at math, about 17 attempts per game. And so touches wise, when you think from reception perspective too, I mean, he's getting over 20 touches a game and he stayed healthy all year. So I think that you like that. I know the BMI guys are not going to like him being under 200. I know the spreadsheets are not going to like that. But I like him in one-on-one situations. I think he can make guys miss in the open field. I think he's a weapon. Now, when you think of like draft capital, probably day 3-ish, maybe early, or maybe a team likes him and kind of moves up a little bit. I like to see him, if Smith goes somewhere, I'd love to see him go somewhere that's going to utilize him. Now, I'm not comparing him to this guy, so please don't go in the comments yelling at me, but to a Gibbs light, like a guy that like how the Lions use Gibbs is really what you want to see Smith be used as, because unfortunately we've seen guys like Smith come and go and they get drafted by the wrong team with no clear, like, hey, this is how we're going to use this kid. And then they just wash out because that's just how it goes. But I love that he's going to the Senior Bowl. I think that he has a chance to kind of make a name for himself there. A guy like Rasheen Ali did the same thing last year and unfortunately just got hurt. But those first, like, I think it was day or two, like people were like, oh, hey, who's this kid? I think Smith could do that as well. And after like Ollie Gordon and Cam Scatterbo's there, I know some people like Cam Scatterbo, but like after that, Devin Neal, you're looking at a list of like, hey, Smith could kind of make a name for himself there based on the names that are there. So that's something to know as we kind of head into this early draft season, go in the Senior Bowl. I think Brashard Smith's one of those guys that you got to keep your eye on.
Yeah. Converted wide receiver. Important to note, but also just had his best receiving year as a running back. When he transferred over from Miami, I think the intention was maybe to play wide receiver, and then they quickly realized that he was a good running back. And that's part of, like Kevin said, he's got really good vision, and when he sees a hole, he hits it really, really hard. That's not something that he's been doing for a very long time. So I don't even think this kid has really hit his ceiling. And I do think it will take a zone scheme. I think there are certain teams where he would really, really excel. The 49ers are a team that they like drafting running backs and they like doing it in those mid rounds. And it's like, he kind of fits in that McCaffrey-esque mold. He's not Christian McCaffrey. I'm not saying that. We've compared him now to Jameer Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey.
Oh man, we're getting canceled today.
We are
Poor
getting
Randy.
canceled.
Randy's so stressed out right now. He's like, what are you guys doing?
But in that same like play style, I think that's something that he could be successful in. And this is one of those guys I think folks are gonna get around to shortly, and maybe he won't be necessarily a gem, and it'll just be, this kid's probably a top 6-7 back in this class, and in a loaded class, I think that's a really important thing. Now it's a little less loaded with a few guys going back recently, and we'll have the full list next week. But Smith to me is he's one of my favorites as well. I'm glad Kevin picked him. He's my RB6 right now, so like I'm super high on him as well.
Oh
yeah. I think he's got a chance to be. He's going to compete for the best back at the Senior Bowl for sure. I think he's probably the second best, just off the top, as a pure 3-down kind of workhorse back for you. I do think he'll be able to show out there as long as he plays in the game. I think he'll be a driving force, just like he was for SMU. He was their consistent offense. The quarterback play, receiver play, everything was up and down. They were super explosive at times, but Smith was always the driving force of this team, and I think that'll continue at the next level. I will be a little bit more realistic and say he can go to a team that actually needs him in this role to replace an aging veteran they just signed. I mean, him complemented with Brian Robinson as the actual young Eckler is a perfect play style.
Yeah. New England, maybe be the whatever they were trying to do.
Something. That's
I mean, with weapons.
Ramondre, him, like if they want to try to do the Antonio Gibson role there. I think when you look at his PFF stuff, I mean, he had 52 missed tackles for us this year, which is good. I think 35 explosive runs is what you like to see out of him, like that explosiveness there. And his PFF run grade, 87.0. I mean, it was a top 10 PFF runner. So whatever you want to do with PFF grades, I get it. Like, whatever you guys are out there, you're going to roll your eyes. But definitely had that. I think the one drawback you would say is he didn't really do anything at Miami for whatever reason, like when you're thinking of kind of what his position was, what was going on there. But then he came at SMU and he performed. So production talks. And I think when you see them going to the playoff this year, I think that means something. Big games, he really stepped up in those. So again, I think that if you want to look at running backs from 2 to like 9, there's not a lot of discrepancy between those guys. I think unless you want to put Henderson and Hampton up there, and then you're like, okay, what are the next guys? But that 4 to 9 range, I mean, really, you pick your poison. Like if you have him at running back 6, I didn't realize he was that high for you. That's nice because you're saying, hey, he could definitely kind of get in that top 5, and all it needs is one team fall in love with this kid and his skill set. And remember, this league is a copycat league. They see kind of how some of these smaller backs kind of being used by some of these smart offensive coordinators. Maybe they do that. Maybe not all offensive coordinators will, but maybe they will do that there. All right, Randy, who you got?
All right, so my first one, I believe, switches graphic, is Darius Alexander from Toledo. I'm trying to find another D tackle deeper in this class. We've really talked about a lot of them, but we really haven't gotten around to some of the MAC guys like Darius Alexander, 6'4", 310, on the Feldman's freak list. obviously 35 pressures, 4 sacks, 27 stops, 89.9 grade, 90 in the run, 76.6 in the pass. 6 hits on the quarterback, 3 bats. He did everything you wanted there. He gives you a great first step with long arms, dominant punch. He shows really good flexibility and movement, especially in a counter move. He is really decisive with a club rip across the face of the center and the guards. He does a great job pushing the pocket back at all times and just light feet at all times and giving a good anchor in the run game. He's consistently blowing up every play there. He made a lot of big plays for this team. They have a few really good defenders on this team, but they continued to lock up and just dominate. Obviously, it wasn't as good a year for Toledo as it was the year before, but I still think he was the best player on this Toledo team for sure. I do wish he got a more consistent motor throughout the game. I did think he slowed down at times. I do think he stands up a bit too much once in a while. I think that might be a little bit of lackadaisical against the MAC competition at times. So I do think what we see in these senior bowls and everything against some better competition will allow him to continue to develop and continue to shoot up the boards. I do think he's a day 2 guy. I think maybe tape-wise, for a lot of people, it might be early day 3. I do think he goes day 2. And once he improves that toolbox at another level of competition, I think the sky's the limit for this guy. He's a penetrating 3-tech.
Yeah. So I just wrote up a top 50 free agents article for our Substack, and Milton Williams made my top 20. And Milton Williams at Louisiana Tech, I believe that's where he went. Sounds right. This is a very similar. I think Alexander's a bit bigger, and so I think maybe Milton was a little bit more explosive. But when you look at the whole body of work, and I think that's important with Alexander, this year the pass rush came down a bit, the sack totals came down a bit, but the run defense was really, really good this year. And it really, the level of competition this year just wasn't great. They really didn't play anyone on the schedule. I think Pitt is probably their toughest opponent, but Pitt was his best game. That was kind of how he finished up the year. So this is a kid that I know has been a favorite in our Discord. A lot of folks that are talking NFL draft have really been pumping up Darius Alexander. I've watched a little bit. I don't have a grade on him at this point, but I totally see it. This defensive tackle class is absurd. So if he does fall to day 3, I think a team is getting a really good value here.
When you're looking at everything, when you see the pass rush grade and then you see that run defense grade when he got better, like, that's fun. I mean, this defensive class and defensive line class is a lot of fun here. There's like a Darius guy who could have easily been like a day 2 kid. If he goes day 3, just the depth in this class. I mean, with what he's able to do, and you got to love the pressures. And when you look at like the hurries, I mean, he had 25 hurries, but every game he accounted for at least 1 hurry outside of 1. I mean, this kid was coming after it. And if you could do that at Toledo, you could do that on an NFL team, like, because you're getting doubled, triple probably on a Toledo defense that definitely probably wasn't that good. I don't really know that much about Toledo. I'm sorry, Rockets. But like when you're looking at it from that perspective, Darius, that's a great pick. I like that pick, especially with this. I mean, if you're just now getting into the draft stuff, I cannot tell you how many defensive linemen I want to draft. Like, I just look at it like, man, I'll take this kid. Shit, I don't even know where I'm going to put this kid if I'm a GM, but I'll take him and I'll figure out a role for him. So like it is a very loaded class. I think a lot of them are 5 years too. Like, they've been in there 5 years. They've developed. Yeah. They're ready to go. Plug in, plug and go. All right, Christian, speaking of D-line, where are you leaning?
Yeah, Donovan Ezeraku, the Boston College edge rusher, 6'2", 247. So when you think of edge rushers, you probably don't think of 6'2" guys, but this is a class full of guys that have to be outliers, and this is one that I'm certainly betting on. 61 pressures this year, 14 sacks, 42 stops, just a dominant player. There was a time period through the middle of the season where people were like, oh, was it fake at the beginning of the year? What happened? And then he finished his season with 8 sacks in his last 4 games. So he just returned to dominance. This is, once again, a kid where you see those sack totals. It's similar to Mike Green from Marshall, who I've talked about quite a bit on this show. If you haven't caught that, make sure you go check out our other episodes as well. But this is a kid that you see his measurables, you see his sack totals, and you're like, okay, speed guy around the outside. And then you watch him play and you're like, oh, wait, he can defend the run really, really well. Very, very strong. Length is certainly not going to be his forte. I don't think that he's going to win with just, straight arming long offensive tackles. That's not going to be his go-to. But he's a bendy player that has a nice toolbox. I wouldn't say it's like complete yet. I would say he's probably got to work on a few more counters, but like his counter to the inside is really good for a kid his size. He's able to provide good run stuffing ability as an edge rusher. So to me, that's a 3-down type of guy. When I look at where he ranks in this edge class, which we talked about the defensive line class, but the edge rushing class is also fantastic. I've got him down at edge 7, but right in that like Jalen Walker range for me. I'm a little lower on Jalen Walker. Similar type of player though, where I think actually Ezraku is a better run defender. I think he's a more complete player at this moment. He's not as athletic and he's not as explosive as a guy like Jalen Walker, but I feel more confident that Ezraku is going to be one of those guys that maybe only gets you 7 to 9 sacks a year, but he can stay on the field for all 3 downs, and that's just as valuable as maybe 12 sacks. And I think he's going to get to the quarterback. I've got him graded as a quality NFL starter. I think he should be a top 50 pick. I'm not sure if it's going to happen because of the size, but this kid just a remarkable, very, very impressive. Is he at the Senior Bowl? I want to say he is.
Let me check real quick.
Yeah, we're just picking Senior Bowl guys. So
he is. He's there. Yeah. He's going to be there.
Yeah, so I think this is another kid that he's going to impress with his punch. I think he's very, very strong. I think he's going to put some of those bigger offensive tackles and maybe even some of those small school offensive tackles in a blender a little bit in those one-on-one drills. So I think he's going to have a bit of a rise, even though, I mean, the film suggests he's a top 50 player anyway.
I think this edge rusher, like Kevin said with the running backs, is going to be a little bit of a pick your poison. And this is one of those outlier guys that's going to fit that kind of discussion. Like you said, good inside, run defense, what we saw on tape and grade wise, it just doesn't translate to the next level with all the tackles being longer. That's where the question marks will come. The size, you're going to look at the speed on the outside and the bend, and he's got it. It uses that to get a dominant counter move inside with a good rip. We just got to see a little bit more for him to be an every down guy for you. But that's why he's going to develop. That's why he's not a first round pick. But I do think, like Christian said, I don't know about top 50, but I think he's definitely a day 2 guy that can make an impact right away. So.
Yeah, I mean, he wins a lot of different ways. I think that's one thing with his pass rush. Like he definitely can win a lot of different ways. So that's what you like to see there. I think the size is we'll see. We'll see what team likes it. Like that's what it's gonna be. It's just gonna be like what team can overlook the size and just be like, go. I mean, just see what he kind of measures in at. I hope he stays 6'2".
Yeah,
staying 6'2" would be good.
The testing is going to be huge for him because if he can get like close to a 9 something, that'll keep him higher on the boards. But if he drops anywhere below like an 8.5, 8, he's going to fall off people's boards because of that size. And a lot of coaches will try and kick him inside to linebacker, and I don't really see the skills there.
This is such an interesting class too, because like. From the top down, you've got Mike Green, who's less than 250 pounds, a little bit taller. I think James Pierce, almost into the 230s, also taller, but like he looks skinny out there. Jalen Walker, 6'2", 245 is what I believe he was listed at. Ezraku, Josiah Stewart from Michigan. Like there's a ton of tiny little edge rushers in this class, and I think actually all of them are in that outlier mold where maybe not all of them. I think I'm lower on a couple of them, but this is one that I would bet on along with, some of the ones that I mentioned.
I was going to say, that's not the definition of outlier. It's just picking them all and being like, yeah, that's the outlier there.
These are my gems. All of these small guys.
There we go. That's better. That's better. All right, let's move on to mine. So I didn't go Senior Bowl. Everybody should be happy about that. I went Shrine Bowl, baby, because the Shrine Bowl doesn't get enough love out there. Hanging out in Dallas this year. They moved from Vegas. I'm going to take a receiver. I'm going to take Nick Nash from San Jose State. Now, before before I get into all this stuff, yes, he's old. I want everybody to know. Yeah, he's 6'3", 195. This is his 6th year in college at San Jose State. However, he played quarterback for basically the first 2 to 3 years. Like he was kind of a converted guy there. And this year, I mean, he balled out. That's really what we have to say here. 104 receptions, 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns. And when I say this out loud, it's just, obviously that's where San Jose was still going. 171 targets this year. That's how many he had. He had multiple 17 target games. He had a 23 target game this year against Washington State. So he was getting targets there. Like, you have to like that. And then just from a perspective of, okay, where did he line up from the slot? 93% from the slot. So he's definitely a slot guy there. And when you look at his ADOT, 13.3. So he was a big play kid. And I think the thing that stood out for me the most of all those targets that he was getting, so 171, he has 7 drops on the season. But with those 7, I mean, it's hard. What dictates a drop for PFF? What doesn't? But he does have sure hands. When you watch him, like when you see him play wide receiver, basically anything thrown close to him, most of the time he's catching it. And I think that's the one thing that stands out for me. He's deep threat kid. I think he's physical too. He's got a good frame. And if he stays around that 6'3", 190, 195, I like that for his measurements. So I think his measurements are going to be key there. And then, you know what, with any old prospect, we got to put the experience tag on him. He's played a lot. So maybe not a wide receiver, but he's definitely been around there. I think the biggest thing is he's not playing outside. I think the question is, can he play in a slot, and even though he's as big as he is, can he still create separation at the next level? I think that's the one thing against man. Where does that come from? But I think that from a day 3 kid, this is going to be definitely a day 3 guy. I think he has developmental traits. I think he's played enough to where there's some pretty bad third wide receivers out there starting. I don't know if you guys have watched the NFL this year, but like you're looking around there and you're like, hey, this guy's getting snaps out here. I think that he definitely has that. His productivity is not always gonna get them drafted, but I think with his skills and that production this year, you have to like that. So I like him. I think that he can kind of make a role for himself on a team. Especially you see kind of these smaller kids do this, and they kind of have that big playability. You're gonna love if he gets drafted by a team that maybe has some depleted wide receiver room. Chargers come to mind, Patriots come to mind. There's some teams out there you're like, hey, will they give him a shot? Tennessee comes to mind. Tennessee's been drafting kids like this forever. They keep missing, but maybe one time they're going to get it with another staff here. So those are the type of guys that come into mind here. But I like Nick Nash. I think that he'll be a trendy pick in fantasy drafts in the 4th, 3rd rounds, depending on where he goes exactly when he gets drafted. But he has a role. Like I could see him and Shador doing well at the Shrine Bowl together. Like I could think if they play on the same team, I can see them making a connection. He can make a few catches there, and all he needs is a few catches, and he can pop off and he get a combine invite.
Yeah, 50% contested catch rate, which is good. Especially, a lot of folks will see the 36 contested catches and say, well, can he get separation? I mean, he had almost 200 targets, so 36 being contested, I think is okay. And he forced a lot of missed tackles this year. I think, he's not a huge yak guy. I think he's more of a bigger play type of guy, downfield winner. I think he can make some guys miss underneath, but I think mostly what you're getting is a reliable guy that can move the chains, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's tough with these small school guys. When you look at who he played this year, I mean, 23 targets against Washington State. Wyoming, 17 targets. Kennesaw, he caught 17 of 19 targets against Kennesaw. Was his best performance of the year.
That's what you're telling me right there. Efficiency.
Yeah. 225 yards and 3 touchdowns in that one, but it's Kennesaw. So, but like you look at the game against Boise, who was in the college football playoff, and I wouldn't say their pass defense was the reason why. I think maybe their running back was, but 9 receptions, 126 yards and a touchdown. And Nick Nash is the only guy on that San Jose State offense that defense were focusing on. Yeah. So the fact that he was fed targets and able to be productive in those games, I mean, Oregon State, 161 yards, 6 catches, 161 yards. So we'll see. I think he's got a very important pre-draft process ahead of him. But these small school guys, they can play sometimes. I think having the Shrine Bowl to see if that's the case is exciting. I like when these guys go to all-star games for sure.
Hey, give me that all-star tape, baby. I love that all-star tape to throw out everything else. Give me those one-on-one reps there. Randy, any thoughts on him before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, he gives you all the vibes of just a veteran slot at the college level, performing at all levels, and is going to be able to give you valuable snaps at the next level. I don't think he's ever going to be like the fantasy darling necessarily, unless he can develop in the right situation and get more of the red zone looks that I think he clearly has shown the aptitude towards. But what all it takes for any of those guys is the right situation, and then they become monsters. So I think he has all the rights to do that. We'll see how the shine goes. Like you said, I think he'll be able to show out with a very accurate and consistent thrower at quarterback.
Cooper Cup. Yeah,
I
Cooper
didn't
Kupp
want to
there.
do that.
Wow,
I just didn't
throwing
want to
names
do
out.
it.
We were just throwing
I
some names out
avoided
now. I didn't want to throw Puka Nakua out either, so I was leaving that one in the chamber as well. All right, Chris or Suey, Randy, who you're out? What do you got?
Those are things, yes. All right. So I went with Dorian Strong for the next one.
Oh, Deion Sanders, right?
Guy.
Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
That's the okay.
Yeah, not that. Honestly, I do think he's got the adequate size, 6'1", 185, a little bit lighter than you'd like necessarily, but the 29 tackles, 61.6 rated against, and the 2 interceptions are some of the big standout things for him. 75.3 total grade, 66 gets the run, 75 tackles, 76 in coverage. Did have a fumble, 2 picks, 6 pass breakups. So I do think he shows you a lot of really good things. He's a very good athlete. He shows fluid, flexible, and with the hips and good swivel everywhere, and really good reps in the press, despite the slimmer frame. Great ball skills at the top of the routes, consistent tackling, was a monster breaking up screens. We're going to say this with a lot of corners, especially me and Christian, very grabby, recovery speed, and, the willingness to go for the play in zone. So I put down Trayvon Diggs style corner. I think that's super fair because anytime he's in zone, I do see him bite a good amount, and that's where you see the recovery speed kind of come back to bite him. I do think to be consistent outside corner at the next level, we got to see a really good Senior Bowl here. I think if he can get pressed against, Christian's guy here, I think he can do a lot of damage, but if it's a backed off man-to-man, I don't think he's going to have a great day. So that's where I want to see some good reps from him this week, or not this week, next week, I believe, right? And then I do think a little bit coaching, a little bit more technique, maybe a little bit of weight on him. He's going to be a consistent outside corner. He started most of his snaps have been on the right side cornerback, only a little bit in the slot, but I think adding into a cornerback room right away at impact, I think he can be a strong nickel corner for you and make some impact plays on the outside.
I love Dorian Strong, man. I'm glad you put him on the list. Yeah. He's my corner 4. Let me rephrase. I haven't yet adjusted after Jahdae Barron's playoff run, which I am going back, and he's probably my corner 5. So I don't want to lie on this show. But he's basically, he's the next Deion Sanders. No, I do think everything Randy's talking about is clearly there on film. I think as a man coverage corner, which a lot of teams are running a little more man this year, as a man coverage corner, I think he's up there, maybe not with the top 3, but he is that next tier of guys where I'm very intrigued. I think he's a better man coverage corner than Jahdae Barron. I think as far as press coverage goes, I'm intrigued. I think this kid is going to be a starter at the NFL level. I've got him graded as such. I've got him graded as a quality NFL starter and like a 2nd round grade. So this is a kid I've really liked for a while now. I'm excited to see what his pre-draft process looks like. I think the 6 feet thing needs to be confirmed. He's 6'1" listed. I've seen more like
6.
I've seen like 6 foot and maybe a half an inch. And
everything.
Every inch counts, especially with corners. But he plays like he's a 6'2" corner, and I think that's an important note. I like him.
No, I mean you could compare reps at least to what we've seen from some of the best man cover, press cover corners in the last 5 draft classes. But like I said, there's a little bit of technique things that need to be cleared up, and he's very good in the ball skills and the tracking at the peak of a route like that in man coverage. But because he knows he is, I think anytime it's in zone, he gets a little bit baited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's coaching, right? They'll coach that out of him.
exactly.
And if you have the skills and you have the everything there, I think that's the type of guy that you have to kind of bet on the traits and everything there. He's going to the Senior Bowl, so hey, we got another Senior Bowl. Him versus Jalen Noel. I can't wait to see kind of how.
That's what I'm saying. If he can get up on him and he can be impressed, I think he wins the rep. But
Yeah.
if there's anything else,
we're gonna have to have a show
taking live
bet.
bets.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a live bet
on each rep
in the group message. All right, here we go. Jalen Noel's
They'll
up.
never
Let's see how
match
this
up against
goes.
each
Good
other.
story. That's strong. All right. Yep. So those are our gems. So when you're going through here, Jalen Noel, Brashard Smith, Darius Alexander, Donovan.
Ezeraku.
Thank you. Ezeraku. That's actually not that hard. Dorian Strong there. I don't want to get skewered. Someone on YouTube skewered the hell out of me the other day. Said I'm a fake fantasy expert because I didn't know how to pronounce a name. And I said, bro, I've never wanted to be a fantasy expert. So thank you. Thank you for that there. I appreciate that. So if that was you, thank you, buddy. So when you're thinking of this, now, before we get out of here, though, I did want to ask these guys just a quick name of someone else that you wanted to throw on the list, but you didn't want to get on there. Christian, you got anybody?
Yeah, I'm not going to follow your rules, though. I'm going to give you two names.
Okay.
One, the reason why, listen, Randy, I saw that. Listen, I don't know if this guy's even a gem at this point because I think a lot of people have turned on the William and Mary film. But Charles Grant, who was also at the Senior Bowl, 6'4", 300. Some project him to be a guard. This kid, I know the level of competition is certainly going to be a question, but we see tackles from lower levels become successful at the NFL level quite a bit. This kid rocks. Like, he's got insane movement skills. He's a nasty, nasty offensive tackle. He puts people on the ground. We'll see. We'll see what this. He is one where I think his stock could maybe go down at the Senior Bowl if he gets into some power rushers. But if he can hold his own against them, I think he's probably a round 2, round 3 type of player from William and Mary. So I'm going to call that a gem. And then my other gem, Max Brosmer from Minnesota. I really liked him over the summer. He had a rough start to the year, and it was like, okay, he's adjusting from he transferred up from a lower level as well. Gets to Minnesota, struggles a little bit at the beginning of the year, and then some of the stuff down the stretch, it was like, yeah, I saw that all over his film heading into this year. Kid throws with anticipation, really smart football player. He's like a toned down version of Curtis Rourke. I have him graded pretty low in my quarterback rankings, if only because I'm not sure if that translates or not. But I think there's a chance that this kid latches on as a high value backup at the NFL level. And sometimes we see guys like that pop off. I mean, I wouldn't compare him to Gardner Minshew because he's not the personality, but a Gardner Minshew-esque career could be in store for Max Brosmer.
All right, that's your guy.
I do love Brosmer.
I know. I never forget when you put that somewhere in a chat we were in. I'm like, who the hell is Max Brosmer? And I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, Minnesota quarterback, the hotbed of quarterback development.
Yeah. I've been burned by Minnesota quarterbacks before. What was that
you
one
have?
kid's name?
What was that old dude's name? I forgot. He was not a kid. He was bald like you, and he was like 27 years old, and he's out here.
That's right. But so I liked him before. He was.
What was his name? Oh my god.
He was one of the first players. So back in the day, Randy and I, this is, we've gotten a little short, so we've got time for a quick story. His first name was Tyler, I believe. But back in the day when Randy and I first started doing draft content, we put together this small little draft guide. And so in my Canva, this is super inside baseball and no one cares about this. So feel free to please stay tuned for Randy and Kevin's one extra gem. But in my Canva, I have a list of school logos to put into these things. Minnesota is one of the first ones because I was so into this kid. Tanner Morgan. I knew it was started with a T at least.
I was trying to scroll through the list, couldn't get there fast.
Tanner Morgan. I ended up lower on him. I do want to put that out there. After he stayed in school for 2 more years after I liked him, but he was one of the first players I created a draft card for. So and wrote a little scouting report for. So he'll always have a special place in my heart. And Max Brosmer is going to hurt me just like Tanner Morgan did.
All right, Randy, you got anybody?
Fun to hear.
You want to throw in there?
Yeah, I will say I'll kind of roll off what Christian did. I think we could get 4 to 5 starting centers out of this draft class. I don't think we maybe have world beaters, but I think we have very good veteran, smart, capable centers that can go in and just be a leader on the offensive line. And we got a few of those going to the Senior Bowl. So I think obviously it's always fun to watch the wide receiver versus the corners, but this D-line class going and this offensive line class going is going to be the best matchup on the field at every snap. So just wanted that out there. And then I did put it in our show doc kind of jokingly because I kind of am starting to fall in love with another Toledo receiver. And the last time we did that was Deontay Johnson. I was getting a lot of, this kid's ridiculous type things with Deontay. And I'm starting to hear from the same people the same thing. Well, actually, at the start of the year for Juwan Newton, the older brother of Johnny Newton, one of 5 brothers. Yeah,
but
5'11", 192.
That's nice.
Yep. The leading touchdown reception guy for Toledo, top 5 in yards, receptions, all that. Kid's a monster, consistent on the field, really good throttle, knows when to accelerate, knows when to work through a zone and just get open. He just gets open at every time. Hasn't been the best passing offense in Toledo over the last few years, but 72 catches, 1,033 yards, 11 touchdowns this year. Kevin talked about just 8 drops for his receiver. Juwan Newton has 10 drops in his career for 5 years, 4 drops this year. The kid is a monster, consistent at every level.
Yeah. All right. I like that. I'll just pick one. I almost put him on a show sheet, but I didn't, and because I want to talk about offense because I just like offense more. But David Walker, he plays for Central Arkansas. He's getting a little bit of buzz out there, edge, 6'2", 260. He's a 6-year senior, but he's getting some buzz out there from just an edge perspective. He's going to the Senior Bowl, I believe. And when you see him there, they talk about his first step being explosive, ability kind of finish at his level, at the FCS level, obviously. So obviously it's always going to be what can he do against these Division I opponents? So that's why kids like that need to go to the Senior Bowl so teams can see, okay, is what he's doing out there against kind of diminished competition? Can he kind of translate that over? But if he does, he's looked pretty good when you think of him. Like in 2023 at 8.5 sacks, he was really, really good. He had double-digit sacks this year, 23 tackles for loss. Like he was a dominant player this year. When you watch the tape, I tried to watch tape. I found some tape, but it's really hard to find Central Arkansas tape. Like I was going through all kinds of weird stuff, like camcorders, I think is what they got now. So I was going through it, but it's fun. And that's just someone to kind of know as you kind of go through there. So again, those are some of our gems out there, and I hope you guys found some, interest in this there. I wanted to give you guys a look at what Tanner Morgan looks like and tell me that does not look like Christian, because I'm just
made that so fast.
Like if you're on
quick graphic,
if you're on the podcast, go to YouTube real quick, go to 43 minutes, and then just go look at that. That is why Christian liked Tanner Morgan so much. Like he saw himself in the Tanner Morgan there.
I wasn't even bald yet. That's the thing.
Well.
Yeah.
But maybe I was just envisioning my future.
He threw way too hard across the middle, just like you. So it made sense.
That's fair. One last comment. Juwan Newton and Jerjon Newton family. What are you doing there? I think that's why
There's 5 brothers too, and Juwan is one of a twin.
Oh,
what's his name?
I don't remember. No, they have a younger brother that's like a Florida quarterback prospect too.
Oh,
all right.
It's
a hell of a family.
The Jeans in that family were they were crushing it there. Shout out to Newton family, because you guys got some good blood out there. That's the hell of a goal
on the screen, guys.
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna leave them there. So all right,
it's never leaving.
So we appreciate you guys. I hope you guys, listen to the pod. If you're on the podcast, we appreciate you. We're seeing that viewership go up. And, as someone who really strives to have one of the best draft podcasts out there, we're really trying to build something new here. We appreciate that. If you're on YouTube, drop a comment, like, subscribe, give us some love there. Let us know who are some of your gems. It can be offensive players. If you're just fantasy, that's okay. Drop it. Who are some guys that you really like that you think should be getting talked about more? We'll be back next week. We appreciate you guys. See you then.